Okay, welcome everybody to our webinar, Becoming a Chartered Hero, and how BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, is here to help you prepare today for your successful tomorrow. My name's Carl Harris. I'm Director for Marketing at BCS, and I've previously also been a Director for IT as well at BCS, and I'm going to be hosting today's event. All of our panelists today, including myself, share at least two things in common. The first is we're all employees at BCS, but perhaps most importantly for today, we're all proud chartered IT professionals and hope we can share some of our insights and experiences of applying for and being chartered with you all today. So with me today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dale Titcombe, who's Head of IT at BCS, and Dale's also one of our CITP assessors. So you may well get to meet Dale again if you go through the application process. Julia Adamson, who's Director of Education at BCS, and Beverly Clark, who's the National Community Manager for the Academy of Computing programme at BCS. Now, as members of BCS, you're already hopefully very familiar now that we're the UK's professional body for computing, and our purpose is to promote and advance the education and practice of computing for the benefit of everybody. We call this Making IT Good for Society, and part of how we deliver on that mission is by demanding of ourselves as professionals the highest standards of professional competence, ethical thinking and practice. And we believe really passionately at BCS that chartered status is a fantastic way that you can evidence such knowledge and competence against the independent trusted standards that are held by BCS. And it's a great way for you to be able to demonstrate your capability and integrity to employers, clients and colleagues alike. So we hope that through the webinar today, you'll get to learn a bit more about what exactly becoming chartered means, what it might do for your career, a little bit about the process involved and why this would be a great next step in your career journey. And I'm going to be putting a few questions to our panelists so that we can get to hear more about their own journeys to chartered and how that's benefited them. And then later on in the session, I'll put your own questions to the panel. You could submit those questions anytime through the Q&A interface of this webinar, and please do so as your questions come to mind. And so to get us started, I'm going to first off invite each of our panelists in turn just to tell us a little bit about what inspired or motivated them to want to become chartered. And Julia, I'm going to come to you to start with.
Thanks, Carl. Hi, everyone. Well, I think there's one obvious reason. As the Director of Education at BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, I better had be, is probably the first thing I should say. And I'm joining, I didn't really know an awful lot about chartered status. I knew about chartered accountants, but I didn't really know about chartered IT professionals. So I was really interested in finding out more about that. And I actually wanted to understand kind of how somebody like me, a former teacher, someone from the non-traditional IT route, could engage and whether my skill set and my experience would be relevant. I spent 25 years of my career in education, IT and computing, and whilst I've got professional recognition as an educator and a degree, it's not in IT or computing, but I've been working in that space for a long time, and I've done a wide range of roles. So I really wanted to, secure that professional recognition and be validated as a real member of this amazing profession. And I wanted to be able to be in that position then to sort of inspire others and to sort of role model within the education sector, who are a really important part of the developing the pipeline into the IT profession, and perhaps be a role model for others who have not come through a traditional route, who may have moved into the IT profession from elsewhere. We know many have, and who are seeking that additional validation and recognition. So that was kind of what inspired me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julia. Dale, I'll come to you next for your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Good afternoon, everybody. So my route was perhaps more traditional then, compared to Julia's, sort of 20-something years in IT, into corporate IT in a few different places. Similarly, being head of IT for the Chartered Institute for IT, same as Julia said, well, I'd better be a chartered IT professional then, really, hadn't I? And that was my motivation for applying for CITP. It was when I was applying for the role of head of IT back in 2017. I thought those two things went hand in glove, really. So coming from a kind of traditional route, I did know what CITP was. Sort of colleagues of mine above and alongside me in the organisation, and one organisation previous, were also CITP status. So I was looking for something that recognised my past achievements and also my present skills and knowledge. So certainly I see it as a mandatory requirement for my current role, for me to demonstrate my competence to my internal customers, to my own team members as well. And I think it shows evidence of having and maintaining a level of knowledge and skills that are appropriate to the seniority of my role. It doesn't mean that I know everything there is to know about every aspect of IT, because, let's be honest, who can? But it does validate that I can apply my own knowledge and experience, but also importantly enable others who are subject matter experts to apply their own knowledge as well. And I think it demonstrates as well that I understand the implementation of IT and digital as a partnership between technology teams and the business. And finally, similar again to Julia, I became chartered as well to try and role model ongoing personal development within the department that I currently lead. So, if I'm developing, then so should everybody else. It's about role modeling that professional development and maintaining yourself to a standard level.
No, great. Thank you, Dale. And Beverly, what inspired or motivated you?
Thank you, Carl. So my background is that of being in corporate IT, first of all, and then becoming a teacher. So I had about 7 years in corporate IT. Then I retrained and became a teacher, and I spent about 14 years in the teaching profession before leaving teaching 5 years ago, and I'm back out in the IT world. And the one thing that I noticed, that there wasn't a qualification to pull all of those things together to demonstrate that I had the skills and I was at a certain standard and functioning at that standard. So I was really inspired when I saw that CITP was on offer, and specifically it was for CITP for teachers. So in my role functioning before I joined the BCS, I was functioning as a consultant. Where is the standard there? Who has verified me as being at that consultancy standard? So merging those two worlds together, CITP was the link between them. I'll also say that within teaching, I gained my National Professional Qualification and Senior Leadership Qualifications, and there's quite a lot of similarity between the CITP qualification and what you do for NPQSL, the Senior Leadership Qualifications. And I was able to bring those two together and show that how important they are. And of course, working for the BCS, it's good to demonstrate that you are at that standard, of course. And there are lots of skills that you need to demonstrate: leadership, autonomy, influence, analytical skills. And this is a great way of showing those skills through gaining CITP status.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Beverly. And just to share from my own experiences too, I mean, I started my professional career in the late 1990s in what was then the emerging web design and development industry, and internet and web development capability was certainly considerably less mature than it is today. But back then it was a fantastic domain for technical and creative innovation in particular, but web professionals were certainly not recognized in the same way as their more traditional IT peers at that time. And for me personally, charter status was an aspiration I held as a way of showing my capability, knowledge and competence was in line with my more traditional IT peers, and that my skills and knowledge were recognized by an independent and trusted body like BCS is. And it was particularly relevant goal for me in that regard too, as certainly during the first sort of 10 years of my career in the web field, there wasn't a strong market of certification or skills validation that there is today, where I could easily evidence my capability and skills in web development. So charter provided a way for me to do that, and a way for my employer to understand how I compared against those it perhaps more traditionally recognized as IT professionals. And and the same is still true today. And while in my own domain web development skills very very much a core now of our industry's talent mix. There are many new and emerging skills domains in our profession, take machine learning or data science, for example. And if you work in those emerging or rapidly developing areas, then Chartered can provide the same sorts of value for you as it did back then when I had to kind of evidence and show how I stood among peers working in a kind of new and innovative space. So I'm going to move on and invite our panelists next to share some insights as to how they've benefited from having chartered status since it's first awarded. And Beverly, perhaps I'll come to you first on this one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. So first of all, I'll say how proud I was to achieve CITP status. So some of the things that, first of all, the post-nominals. So I was really proud to put those onto my CV and my LinkedIn profile. And as Carl has mentioned, that chartered status, it demonstrated that I had the knowledge and skills and was a credible IT professional. Also being on the public register, which is a register that any organization, anyone can go and check. I was really proud to be on that register. And that I know that some organizations do check to see who is this person, where have they come from, what skills they're demonstrating. And that was really, really good for me. And also I've had the ability to train as a CITP assessor. So there is an ongoing CPD opportunity there, and also to support others. So I'm supporting some of my team through the CITP qualification. So there is that mentoring and support angle. Also being able to speak at BCS specialist groups, and also within the Computing at School network, I speak at specialist groups. So that CITP qualification has benefited me by underlining the credibility, and also because I have been checked independently. Later on, I'm sure we'll discuss the interviewing process, but through the process that you go through to gain CITP, it's a rigorous process, and that underlines the credibility that you then bring with your CITP status.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Beverly. Dale, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So echoing that about self-esteem, a sense of achievement, being there on the public CITP register for anybody to find and validate that you've achieved this standard. If I think as well, not that I am currently or have since being CITP, but if I were thinking of moving on from my current role into another role or to a different employer, I do think it would add something, provide that extra competitive advantage possibly against other candidates, that here I am with a level of verified competence that's been rigorously assessed against a recognized industry framework. So, in a nutshell, you can trust me. I'll do what's required of the role to a high level of competence. Picking up again on something that Beverly said about being an assessor. So if you being a chartered IT professional, if you are, you can also decide whether being a CITP assessor is right for you. A few years after being awarded CITP, I thought, let's have a look as well at the CPD opportunity of also being a CITP assessor, and going through a sort of selection and training process to do that, and to interview other applicants, other sort of IT professionals who are looking to achieve the standard. And perhaps not a kind of natural obvious first benefit, but definitely one of being an assessor, is being able to virtually meet lots of other IT professionals, be them your fellow assessor or the candidates themselves, because there's always something you can learn, even from the most shortest of conversations with a fellow peer, a fellow IT professional. And I always think back to recently, within the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, I interviewed one candidate whose presentation about the project that they had a major role within was all about an office move, an IT manager and an office headquarters relocation. And it was of a very similar scale and scope that we here at BCS were just beginning to plan for ourselves. So I thought, that was absolute gold to me, even though I was the guy there being one of the two assessors on that assessment panel, not the candidate. On that occasion, I learned so much and took kind of copious notes from what the applicant was telling me about their own experiences and successes of moving their headquarters and all of the IT services that needed to go with it. So that kind of community of CITP professionals, knowing that other people are a real mine of useful information. There are opportunities where you wouldn't perhaps necessarily expect to find them. So that really is, the benefits of learning and continuous professional development. And staying current is really difficult in an industry like ours, I think, which moves at such rapid speed. And the last 12 to sort of 14, 15 months have shown us that and then some. Because in my role, like many other people, I need to have a wide and up-to-date knowledge lens, spanning information security, legislation, hardware, software, development methodologies, etc., etc. The list goes on and on, really. Now, being CITP doesn't make all of that magically happen and all of the answers, land on my desk. But being CITP means that I'm committing to myself, to the industry that I'm a part of, that I'm going to maintain my skills, my knowledge, my awareness of everything that I need to know about. And I think that's taught me that I care an awful lot more now than maybe I thought I ever would about maintaining the records of my CPD, of my professional development. And being chartered really gave me the impetus to keep records of those professional development activities that I'm undertaking, even if they're just happening naturally in the day-to-day job, which inevitably they do for anybody in any profession. So it's really about recognizing the professional development that comes with being part of a recognized standard, and committing to yourself that you will maintain yourself to that level.
No, great. Thank you, Dale. And Julie, I'm going to come to you for your insights.
Thanks, Carl. So I think from a benefits perspective, I think the process kind of helps you self-reflect. So we're all busy 24/7, I think, and sometimes to have the opportunity to stop and look back and think, well, what have I done and what skills and experiences have I got, is a really beneficial process. So I really did feel that just benefited me personally to do that, to stop and reflect. And I think it gave me recognition amongst my peers. I mean, I do, like I said at the beginning, we all work for the Chartered Institute for IT, and so there are some clever people who know a lot about a lot of things that I don't know about. So having that sort of recognition amongst peers and being able to sort of be benchmarked by an independent group was really important for me. But also to have that recognition externally, that there has been an independent assessment of my competence, has an impact. It has an impact on my self-confidence, and it helps me to feel empowered. And I think particularly as a female leader in this sector, less so these days, but I used to find myself being the only female in the room most of the time, and imposter syndrome is real for many of us. And I think this really did help with that. So, like Beverly, I'm really and Dale, I'm really proud of achieving CITP. I'm really proud of my post-nominals and of that public record. And actually, when I do a lot of recruiting, and so when I am recruiting, I'm really very interested to see what development people have, applicants have gone through, and would relish the opportunity to see applicants with CITP. That is the ideal that I'm looking for. We're recruiting unusual applicants quite often who've got a mixture of strong IT and computing background, but also an education background, and somebody who's committed to their but both professional development is really the pinnacle for us. So I think there's lots of benefits, but for me most strongly it's personally my personal confidence, and has really benefited from this process.
No, thanks, Julia. I mean, I recall from my own experience being approached in the corridor one day by our chief executive at the time, and he just asked me one question, which is always quite intimidating in the corridor walk, which was I chartered? He didn't ask me anything else, and I wasn't entirely sure the motivation behind the question at the time, but I was certainly very proud and relieved that I could say yes at that moment in time. And I would discover in the weeks to come that it was because I was being considered for an opportunity that needed to be led by somebody, that the organisation felt needed to be someone that held chartered status and the associated level of competence and knowledge that comes with that. And I did get that opportunity, I was pleased to say. But I've also found, and some of you hinted on this a little bit, that while our profession is so different to many other chartered professions, there is a common understanding of what chartered represents and means to employers. So I've certainly found that if you talk with peers in finance, marketing, engineer, law, etc., there's an instant recognition that by being chartered, you've proven a level of competence, knowledge and capability, and that's been independently assessed and recognised by a trusted institution. Obviously, different institutions represent different professions, but it has a kind of a common currency that is understood by employers. So I'm often encouraging others to apply for chartered, and I often get kind of asked, well, I haven't seen too many job adverts recently that require it, but I often make the point that a job advertisement doesn't have to say chartered status in order for an employer to not recognise its value when it comes through on your CV. And as Julia's mentioned as well, certainly when I'm reviewing CVs, someone that's applying that holds chartered status, whether it's an IT role or a marketing role that I now look after, I'm going to give that significantly more value because of what I know that status means and the rigor and assessment that someone's had to undergo to achieve that standard. Now, people watching this webinar may already be starting to wonder what's involved. I can see a little bit of that already in some of the Q&A. And what's the process like? What did we have to do to apply and be awarded chartered status? And, and perhaps looking for some sort of tips and suggestions from our panel as to things people might want to give consideration to or think about and when they're preparing their application. So, Julia, perhaps I could come to you first for this, for some sort of insights and tips as to what you might suggest people do as they start to think about preparing an application.
I mean, I'll use I'll use an old teaching analogy. It's the 5 Ps. Perfect planning prevents pathetic performance, I think it used to be in those days. But it is about being prepared. So spend some time reflecting. Get your CV out. I don't know even if you've got an up-to-date CV, but keeping an up-to-date CV is something that's really important. And so, and look through all of the different roles that you've had and what you brought to those, and the sort of breadth of experiences that you've had. I'd also say, think about who you're going to ask to be your supporters and engage with them and have that conversation and get reflections from peers and other colleagues about what they feel that you bring, because quite often it's quite difficult to think about yourself. It's easier to actually think about somebody else's skills. So have a conversation with other people and perhaps have that sort of peer-to-peer discussion about, well, what do you see in me? What skills do you see? And then sometimes that can make it easier. So I think that would be my main tip.
Yeah, no, thanks, Julia. Dale, what about you?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess for a lot of people, it was for myself when I was applying, sort of back in 2017. It on the surface seemed quite a daunting process. It's clearly rigorous. You have to put a reasonable amount of own effort in to go through the application process. But having come out the other side of it, and having sort of been involved in assessing as well myself now, although on the surface it might seem a bit daunting, this isn't just my own experience, but I've spoken to sort of a small handful of other people who have said similar as well. In reality, you probably find you might even enjoy the process of applying. That might sound a little bit odd, but how often do you get the opportunity to hit the pause button and recap and write about yourself, your knowledge, your achievements, how you've influenced others, how you've influenced your business to achieve goals or make step changes. And that's we don't often get many opportunities to do that. We all work at such a fast pace, in lots of people experience that, hitting pause and reflecting on achievements and experiences from the last sort of few years or so, which are going to be relevant to the CITP application, they don't come along every day. So advice really would be everything Julia said about, take stock, review, what have you done, carefully plan how you want to present that. You'll probably do 2 or 3 iterations of the words you want to use within the written submission, and that's on average about right. 2 or 3 iterations of sort of an hour or so each, where you're slowly improving that at each iteration to represent kind of you in the most succinct and professional way, and what your impacts have been. I think there might be a myth to bust about the face-to-face interview, because of course part of the process is you will have a face-to-face interview presentation with 2 assessors, and although you are delivering a short presentation and answering the assessors' questions about your recent career and your skills in general, and the presentation that you've just provided, I can't stress enough, it really is a peer-to-peer conversation. Yes, you're being assessed, but it's absolutely nothing to be feared. It's not too dissimilar, you could argue, than us IT professionals here having a conversation, and the many sort of watching and listening as well. I think I've seen a question perhaps pop up in my eyesight, which was about the specialism. Which specialism do I choose? Because the application process, it's important to know which of the dozen or so specialisms I should choose. Well, I will say this specialism is important. It is important to choose the correct one, because you will be assessed against the standard, but the lead assessor of the 2 assessors that you'll ultimately have that interview panel conversation with will share the same specialism that you're applying within. So it's really important, even if you have a role which crosses multiple specialisms, and a lot of people will, I think, because of the nature of the jobs that they do. I think it's important to look at the specialism, narrow it down to one where you are your strongest. It might not mean that's where all of your day-to-day job goes or all of your experiences are, but where are most of your strengths, your kind of experiential strengths, and which do you think you are therefore most competent in? And I think that ought to help kind of zone into one specialism in particular. But I know, because various people have asked me in the past, how do I know which specialism it is? And it is, which do you think you are the strongest in? Because that's how you'll represent yourself the very best.
No, thanks, Dale. Good advice there. And Beverly, tips or insights from yourself?
Thank you, Carl. I'm going to follow on from something that Julia said, and that's regarding being a reflective practitioner. It's something that I did a lot when I was teaching. And so part of this process is, when you start gathering your CV together and looking at your experiences, reflect on what you've done, what you've achieved, and what you'd like to share with the interviewers, and how that would help you in industry. So that reflective practitioner piece is really, really important. And something that Dale said regarding choosing your specialism, as you said, there are many areas through which you can overlap with, but there will be opportunity during the interview process to talk about other areas. So you're choosing one that's core, but you can definitely talk about the other areas. Now, the interview process, you've got the timed interview. So that's my first tip: practice your interview and ensure you are within that time frame. Because I know in my case, it certainly was a hard stop. So ensure that you practice that interview, because that's the first thing you're being assessed on, your timekeeping and your ability to actually stick to that. So that's very, very important. help, using your sponsors and your mentors outside to help you to craft that presentation, and also think about what questions could be asked as a result of what you're presenting. And that's the reflective practitioner bit. If you're saying you've done certain things in AI or cybersecurity or networking, whatever you've done, what questions could you be asked for that? And that does help you to prepare fully for that interview. I know in my case, I was doing some work in AI at the time, and one of my interviewers, to go back to something that I think Dale shared earlier, he had an interest in AI and he was out in the Channel Islands, and off the back of my interview, an opportunity came up from that. So it was an ability to network, an opportunity to network with someone that I didn't actually think in an interview process that would actually happen. So, you've got to think about putting your best foot forward at all times throughout the process, from the presentation all the way through with every single question. I think that those are my top tips there.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Beverly. And certainly from my own experience, a big part of what we're assessing against is the Sophia skills framework. And a big part of whatever I do, whenever I know I'm going to face some form of assessment, whether it's an exam or an interview or whatever, is to really understand what is the criteria that the assessing organisation is looking at. So all members can access the Browse Sophia Plus framework via the My BCS portal, and you can drill down into that, and in particular at the level 5 skill, which is where CITP is broadly assessed at. And obviously you can learn a little bit more then about the sorts of the standard and the criteria and the sorts of attributes we're going to be looking for, both in your application and in the things that you might be preparing for the presentation. So we're nearing the point where we'll move to questions from the audience. But before we do that, I think we wanted to finish our sort of panel questions with just thoughts from our panel on what value they give to Chartered, they saw it on the CVs. This is something we've already touched on a little bit in our conversations. And then any sort of other final words of encouragement from our panel as you consider today whether you're going to go forth and apply for Chartered. So Dale, I'll come to you first.
Sure. I mean, I would say, if you've been thinking for a while about applying, do it. You absolutely can. Help us build volume in that community of chartered IT professionals. It's not. They're not going to bloom by accident, and us have a highly professional industry. And I think we can all think and know that we want an industry that's enabling, but is also highly ethical, highly standardized, highly professional. I'd love to see, Julia, and probably Beverly did earlier as well, said it. I'd love to see more CVs, land on my desk that had CITP within them. You also said earlier, Carl. Now, I'm not currently putting those in the job adverts, but when I see them in the candidate sort of responses, on CV, or if an agent who has a candidate ever mentions them, your ears prick up. And I don't think that's just because I'm working for the Chartered Institute for IT. That description of chartered, alongside what you said about chartered status in other industries, that does ring a bell for me, and I think it would for many others as well. And we adding more and more people to the chartered community is the right thing to do if we want this industry of ours to flourish and do the right thing.
Thank you, Dale. And Julia, I'll come to you next.
Oh, you put it so well, Dale, because I was going to say exactly that. I mean, I think, change happens because people make it happen, right? And so be confident and be part of this to, sort of celebrate and recognise our wonderful profession and the skills and experiences that you have. You deserve it, is what I would say. And so it does take a little bit of time and commitment. So, I'm always saying to my team, put it in your diary, make time. It's called research and development. It's called personal development. You need that. And so I think perhaps in the IT profession we're not always good at that, because we're always busy. But I think you should make time for it and reflect and be confident, and then enjoy the confidence that it will bring you. So yeah.
No, thank you, Julia. And Beverly, thoughts from yourself?
Well, IT is a very fast-paced industry and it's changing every single day. So I think it's down to us, as Dale and Julia have said, to ensure we have a standard within our industry. So there's two things that I would say. First of all, there's a personal benefits and feeling proud and showing your credibility, and there's also ensuring that as an industry that the individuals operating within our industry are credible. And so I would say that this is why CITP is really important, that we hold the qualification up and the chartered status up within our industry. I'd also just like to go back a bit and talk about another top tip. It's once you gain your status, to keep a list and a log of what you're doing, because that 5 years for reaccreditation comes around so quickly. You blink and you miss it, literally. So it's really good to keep a list of those things, of what's going on. And to quote from the Computing a School organization I'm working for, which is part of BCS, there is no them and there's no one else out there. There's no them, there's only us. And through us as people interested in computing and IT, we will ensure that this qualification, this chartered status, is the way forward for our industry.
No, very well said, Beverly. I'm pleased to say that we've had plenty of questions come in, and we also had some questions come in advance as well, which was helpful in our preparation. So we're going to do our best in our remaining time to get through as many as we can. There's a sort of a couple of caveats on it. I mean, we don't have any of our operational team on the panel with us today, and some of your questions might be quite detailed, and we will need their input. Some of the team are helping behind the scenes, so we hope we can answer some of those questions for you today. But as we wrap up at the end of this, I'm going to give a plug for the next workshop that we're going to be hosting, which will be an opportunity for you to see a kind of an application being made in real time. And obviously that's a great place where we'll be able to answer quite a lot of the detailed questions that you might have about the application process itself and the sorts of things we're looking for and so on. So we'll try and cover some of that here, but some of it may be also best covered in that next workshop that you'll all get invited to. And then the other thing is, if we don't get time to go through all of the questions, we will have them all captured on our webinar platform here. So we will be able to hopefully follow up with people afterwards if we've not given you the satisfactory answer that you're looking for today. So Dale, I'm going to give you a heads up that for the first question I'm going to come to you on, and it's in relation to the 4 key areas of criteria assessment. So the question goes that, given those 4 key areas of autonomy, influence, complexity, and business skills, how should a candidate present these in a succinct and convincing manner, given there's obviously a limitation in terms of the word count and space on the application form?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that is a challenge of making the application, being presenting your best self in a succinct way within a reasonable set word count. Within that, there is the skill of your written communication and getting across the most important, most impactful points that you think there are to make about you, your career, your experiences, your knowledge. But perhaps more tangibly than that, I would say really focus on the examples and focus on what you personally have contributed to what it is that you're describing or writing about. Remember, the application process is all about you. You're not applying for CITP on behalf of your co-worker or your team at large. So yeah, really quantify what it is that you have done. And look back at, refer to the Sophia framework, especially at levels 5 and above. That in itself is a mine of useful guiding information for making making that written application submission. Because if you look through that that framework, and this is available for all BCS members to see through the My BCS tool to browse the Sophia framework. If you go through different skills at level 5 and above, if you click through, you can see expected knowledge, kind of typical work activities. And all of those, I think, are really good prompts for, turning a switch on in your head and looking at the similarities with the work that you do, and giving you a frame almost to succinctly describe what it is you're doing or have done within that word count. So I think that's a really good place to start, looking at the framework and using that as a guide. It's not a template, but as a guide.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thanks, Dale. We had a question around the numbers of CITP registrants at the moment, and I can confirm there's more than 12,000 chartered IT professionals, and BCS is actively campaigning all the time to attract many more, and of course increase its appeal and recognition to employers. But we're proud as well that it's a global standard. It's not just a standard for those of you that are practicing or learning in the UK, and many of our members are beyond the UK as well. There's a question as to whether there's still a breadth of knowledge exam in the application process. So if you've been with the BCS for a while, you may recall that part of the process used to involve sitting an exam. That's not the case anymore. I can confirm that the process has been simplified. As part of your application, you'll submit statements that describe your experience under the headings that they'll talk to a moment of autonomy, influence, complexity of work, and business skill. You'll be asked to upload your CV, and you'll need someone to support your application. That could be employer, client, colleague, customer, and so on. And after we've assessed that application, you'll be invited to an online interview with 2 of our chartered assessors, and you'll be asked to prep a 10-minute presentation that helps bring your professional competence story to life. And our assessors then can ask you questions and verify your knowledge and competence, and that session's usually about an hour. They're very friendly people. Dale's one of them, so hopefully you've already got a sense already of how friendly our assessors are. And we use all of that information then to help us understand the breadth of knowledge you have, rather than assess it in an exam format like we used to. Dale, I'm going to come to you again for the next question. This relates to the presentation I just touched on, actually. This question goes, from my understanding of the interview, I believe there's a presentation given by the candidate at the beginning, which is correct. What should be in the presentation? I've heard that candidates need to bring their experience to life. Any tips or techniques on how to best do that?
Yeah, sure. So when choosing what to present, and I think picking up from something Beverly said earlier, the really strongly timed bit is the 10-minute presentation. You have a maximum of 10 minutes to present a significant piece of work, or a piece of work or a project that you have significantly contributed to. So it's your choice. But again, it's something that you think demonstrates all of those kind of key competencies in those 4 skill areas that you've mentioned, Carl. And again, it's about your role, and it showcases your experience and your professionalism. So I can't say what it should be about, but I can say exactly. But I can say it should be about something that you have significantly contributed to, because that's where you're going to be able to put across the demonstration of your skills, your knowledge, your competence, your professionalism, and that you can do that. And it's really hard. I found it really difficult. I can waffle on all day, and those who know me well, some colleagues on here will know that to be completely true. And it's a real skill to fit that inside of 10 minutes and tell a convincing story in that time. And that, no secrets, no lies. That's a part of the assessment. Can you do that succinctly within 10 minutes? And the assessors will tell you as you begin, they'll remind you, you've got 10 minutes for the presentation. And, I think that's the hard stop you said earlier, Beverly. They will stop you when 10 minutes, one of them will have the clock running. So kind of as to help prepare for that, I think if you think about how many slides of information, if you like, would you want to share, maybe half a dozen maximum within 10 minutes. And they probably don't want to be aerial 0.8 and, all of them full, landscape A4 pages either. They need to get the most salient points across and practice it, in front of the dog or the cat or your partner if they're willing. Mine wasn't particularly, because it may have been a little bit dry for practicing to a non-IT professional, perhaps. I thought I'd livened it up a little bit, but that wasn't the case. But practice, and when you are presenting as well, keep your keynotes around your desk, around your monitor. I remember when I did my interview, in a room at home, and the wall behind the monitor was kind of almost stuck left to right in this kind of arc of things I definitely didn't want to forget to say, but wanted to say succinctly. So that preparation is really helpful.
No, that's a good tip, and it's worth us saying as well, Dale, isn't it? We're not judging how good presenters people are. That's so people don't need to have an anxiety about the delivery of the presentation. It's all about the content.
Yeah, and can you convey that in a professional manner that gets the most important points across? So no, we're not looking for the most super duper animated PowerPoint presentations, and it's not quantity of slides is we're talking about less is more here, because it's about the succinct skill of being able to put information across quickly and easily.
Yeah, and obviously one of the things we're delighted about at BCS is we've got a fantastic community of assessors. They're all people who are chartered themselves and have been through this process, so they know what it's like to be the other side of the chair, so to speak, or the other side of the virtual screen, as it is, of course, as it's a virtual process that we run. But we do match the assessor's experience with your own and what you're so it should be that the people that are assessing you do have knowledge and understanding and experience of the things that you'll hopefully be presenting and talking, and as Dale mentioned previously, he got enormous value out of some of the assessments he's done. He's been able to learn things he can take away for his own development too. So yeah, no, it's definitely consider it a valuable part of the process that's good for you as an opportunity to convey what you want to get over, but hopefully a rewarding one from a professional development point of view too. There was a question around this webinar being recorded. Yes, we are recording. I'm hoping the recording's working successfully. We'll make it available hopefully in the near future, if you'd like to be able to reference the content again. I'm going to move to some of the other questions that we've had during the session. So we had a question from Sean, and he gave some of the sort of background criteria. How far was he from being a chartered professional? So one of the things that we've done, if you've been invited to take part in this webinar, it's because we believe you're all members who might be at the point where you're considering CITP, whether that's because of your background of qualifications or your experience or how long you've been with BCS. So by very nature of the fact that you're watching this webinar, we do believe this is a good time for you to be considering chartered. Obviously, it's difficult for us to say until you go through the process whether you're exactly right for it now. But we hope by the fact that you've been invited to join this, that you take that as a sign that we feel this is a good time for you to consider putting forward an application. And the next workshop that we'll promo at the end, we'll hopefully go a little bit further as well to helping you decide in your mind whether you're definitely feeling ready to start an application. There's a question around someone who's a chartered engineer in software globalization, but struggled to find the benefit of becoming a chartered IT professional. So to the panelists, what single aspect of CITP do you believe should encourage me to gain another chartership? So that's an interesting scenario where someone's already got one, and the appeal of CITP specifically. Is there anyone who's keen to give a response on this one?
I'm happy to kick starters, just because, I think, I'm a teacher with professional qualified teacher status. I suppose it's probably a similar type of thing. So why would I feel the need to go and get this recognition? And so I think, it's slightly more connected, I think, the engineering and the IT, but I think there is a difference, isn't there, between the two, and it's how far you feel that you want that professional recognition, or maybe you want to role model it amongst your team and within your organization. But I'd say, I feel like it's a really complementary thing to have two things, because many of our roles nowadays are made up of different skills and sectors, and IT more than anywhere else. And actually, I think it's never more relevant to be able to demonstrate that, yes, I have competence and capability in education, but I equally have professional standing within the IT profession as well. So I don't know if that helps you, the person who asked the question, but certainly from my perspective, that's how I felt about it.
Yeah, I just briefly to add to that, Julia, I would agree and say that the chartered IT professional is complementary, because it's adding the professional standard of how you operate in a business context with your IT domain knowledge and experience. So I think it brings the two together really well, actually, because we're assessing you on autonomy, complexity, business skills, and a breadth of knowledge. So I think they do complement, but the chartered IT professional is talking about how you apply that in a professional sort of business setting. There are no exam questions in this about how you configure a network, or how you write a particular class using software language X, Y, or Z. This is about the application of IT in a business setting.
Yeah, no, thank you. There's one question: is a degree required? And the answer is no, it's not. I don't have a degree, for example, and I was able to come through the process. So, but there are, it is part of the range of things that we look at. And if you do have a degree, particularly an accredited degree with BCS, that can go some way to ticking a number of the things that we're looking for. But it doesn't exclude you from being able to achieve chartered status. There's a question around how long the process usually takes. I mean, part of why we're putting on these sessions is obviously to help you be as prepared as you possibly can be to submit your application, both sort of succinctly and successfully, and but depending on that, and whether you can get everything together in good order, and you've got your supporter lined up, you do all those preps well, it can be as little as 9 to 10 weeks, but it's going to vary, of course, depending on the pace in which you want to put forward your application, and agreeing your interview slots and all of those sorts of things. So there's some variance in it, but part of what we hope to do through these workshops and the workshop that will follow is to kind of give you as much of a head start on it as possible, so that we can bring that time frame as close to being as awarded as we can. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, because we've only got a few minutes left, and I do need to talk a little bit about what will happen next. So I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. Let's have a look at what else we've had. There's a few questions that are around chartered engineer and CITP and the difference between them. The standards for both are set out in detail on our website, and that's a good first reference if you want to kind of compare them. We could spend a lot of time going through the differences. Chartered engineer is sort of more, has sort of a broader engineering appeal, and comes from the Engineering Council. So BCS doesn't set that standard; it's set by the Engineering Council through their UK spec document, and we're one of several bodies who are licensed to be able to assess and award against that, and many of our registered members do hold both CEng and CITP. Neither is a requirement of the other, and but whether you would be eligible for CEng or not will depend on whether you kind of meet the different criteria that the Engineering Council look for in CEng. So it's worth having a little look on that on our website, and if you've got sort of further questions around that, then come to us. CITP is a standard that is set by BCS. So we define and set the standard for Chartered IT Professional, and we license other bodies to be able to award CITP as well, and that obviously helps as well with our global reach for the standard. We've got a question around, is there an opportunity to work with a mentor from BCS to ensure an application is as good as it can be? So one of the benefits that we offer to members is a mentoring match-up service via the My BCS platform. It can be used absolutely for finding someone that can assist you with a CITP application, but it can also be used for any form of finding someone to mentor you on any aspect of your professional life, whether that's helping you solve a particular challenge within your job or organization, or finding someone that might mentor you through part of your career development, etc. But if you've not come across that service before, do have a look in My BCS. It's recently had a revamp as well, and you'll find many members on there who have registered and are willing to give their time freely to assist. So we do encourage you to have a look at that. Question around, is there any specific templates to be followed or recommended for the presentation? And Dale, perhaps I come to you. We don't issue a particular template on this.
No, there's no particular template, but if across our website, and we can perhaps follow up after this, Carl, with exactly where on the BCS website. But within applying for CITP, there are a lot of guiding materials. So not a template specifically, but there is guidance that's been written by one or more assessors that describe what a good presentation might look like. Some of the things that I've said already, but an awful lot more as well. So no set template, but tons of guidance for how you can think about applying yourselves to submitting an appropriate written submission, preparing for the interview, and preparing for that presentation as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dale. Well, sadly, we are out of time now for more questions, but we will endeavour to contact people directly to answer any of the questions we didn't get time to put to the panel today. So I'd like to say thank you very much for watching the session. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you found it informative. There is more information about chartered status and how to apply on our website at www.bcs.org. But as members who are clearly engaged in their professional development by virtue of the fact that you're watching this session, we really hope you'll be interested in attending our next follow-up virtual event on this topic. So we'll be hosting a CITP application workshop on the 23rd of June from 11 AM to 1 PM BST. That workshop will walk you through the application process in real time, allowing you to properly understand the process and for you to be able to prepare your application for success. And all registered attendees for today's webinar will be sent a follow-up email with further details for that and how you can sign up to the workshop. So all that remains is for me to give my thanks to all our panel members for sharing their stories and insights. Thank you, panelists, and thank you all for taking the time to attend today and ask your questions. So goodbye from us and good luck on your pathway to becoming chartered. Thank you. Goodbye.